Hello everyone, welcome to this webinar on descriptive statistics, concepts and application scenarios. So, I think we're going to leave some time for others to join. Please, as the webinar goes on, if you have a question, please ask on Slack, on the Slack ban session 783 Gmail, and then I'll answer that at the end of the webinar. So it's exactly 9 p.m. here, like 8 p.m. GMT. I think we'll start like in 5 minutes. Time for others to join. Please react if you can hear me. If I'm not loud enough, please leave a comment on Slack. If you think I'm fine or I'm okay, if you can hear me well, if you can see well, please just indicate. I'll greatly appreciate. So we'll be starting in approximately 5 minutes. Well, a little chit chat, right? While waiting for time to pass, I hope that the course is coming well. Some people have actually made much progress, right? Good job. Others are still to start perhaps, or they're a little busy, and then they'll be up to it. I just want to say that you should keep on keeping on. For the few with whom I've had the one-on-one, share them this strategy of mine. Like I heard from one of my mentors, eat your frogs first. Eat the frog first. Do the most difficult thing, not really most difficult, but the thing that you're most likely not to do first. So I have a couple of courses that I take to, and what I choose to do is that I do some learning first thing in the morning. Up, um, shower up, clean up, a bit of sports, and then I learn for like an hour for starting whatever I have to start. An hour, 1 hour, 30 minutes, such that no matter what happens, I would have learned for the day. No matter how tough the day becomes, no matter how work is for that day, I would have taken my daily dose of learning. And also, one of the things that I wish to talk about is the audacity on the code. I think you should have seen that already. For those who submitted the first project, who have submitted the first project already, um, plagiarism is not accepted, right? Every work that you submit should be yours. It is not, you can be inspired from another person's work, right? But the work that you submit should be yours, and you should reference the work that inspired you. I think that is very important. And also, I'd like to reiterate that the suggested deadlines for the projects, right, are not strict deadlines. They're not strict deadlines, but rather they are suggested deadlines, as I said again. Like what matters is that you complete, or that one completes all the projects before the end of the term or before the end of the minor degree, right? But it is worth noting that completing means doing the project, submitting the project, and then the project is reviewed and it has passed. So it is very advisable to stick to the suggested deadlines such that after you finish your last project, there is enough time to iterate if it doesn't meet specifications, or if you meet specifications on the first shot, then good, right? Good and fine. Congrats, you graduated. But I think we want to avoid the situation where we submit maybe all the 4 projects when it's 1 week to the end of the term, and then we start panicking and being in a state of anxiety. Nonetheless, if the worst comes to the worst, I think uh, there's some extension. Like if the deadline passes, there's some extension. I think it's about a month or so for one to complete whatever I was working on. So that is it. Any other things, we'll chat in the Slack channel or chat one-on-one. So let's start with our webinar for today. So descriptive statistics, concepts, and application scenarios. From looking at the progress of everyone, I think that most people have finished with the first project. Great job. Very great job. And then most people have taken the statistics already, statistics 1 to statistics 1 and 2, and then we're waiting for the next project, analyzing data. So this will be like just a revision of the concepts that were touched during the class, and then giving some real life scenarios on how to use them. Right, so we'll work with some dummy data. It's not real, it's not true, but it will just be how to use the concepts that we would learn, right? So what is our objective? So objective is we want to understand descriptive statistic concepts, how they are used in real world scenarios. So some of the concepts that we're going to touch will be population, sample, types of variables, measures of central tendency, That is the mean, the median, the mode, and the measures of variability. There we have the range, the variance, and the standard deviation. If we have more time, we'll touch the quartiles or the percentile. All of that is the same concept. And maybe do one or two exercises in Excel. So let's start with a scenario. So here is the problem that will guide us throughout the webinar. So here's the scenario. So with the aim to better understand students as well as improve and personalize student experience on the platform, Udacity recently launched a survey to be taken by all current students enrolled in various language degrees. Right? Here are the questions that were posed. Sorry, that petition. Here are the questions that were posed in the survey. 1, how old are you? 2, what is your location, country? 3, how many years of experience do you have in tech in general, programming, reading technical documents? 4, how would you rate our platform on a scale of 1 to 5? 5, how many PCs or laptops do you have? Number 6, what is your current employment status? And number 7, how tall are you in meters? So Udacity, in an aim to understand its students, sends out a survey containing these questions. Right. So they send a survey to the mentors, and then for some reason, I am the only mentor who received the survey, and then I send the survey, or yeah, I send the survey in our band session channel, right? So for some reason, I'm the only one who receives the survey, and then I send it in our band session channel, right? So students of band session 783 participate, and here are the responses. Right, so here we have 10 responses. This dummy data again is not true, right? It's just examples. So age, location, years of experience in tech, rating, number of computers, employment status, and height in meters. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is, who does Udacity want to gather data for? Here are the questions. The aim to better understand students as well as improve and personalize student experience on the platform. Udacity recently launched a survey to be taken by all current students enrolled in various language degrees. So we note here that Udacity wants to have data for all current students enrolled in a language degree, and then they want to improve the experience of all current students, of all the students, sorry, but they need data from all current students in the nano degree or enrolled in the nano degree, no matter which one, right? So that is our population. Who do we want to get data about? That is what they call the population, like everybody, all students that Udacity currently has, right? That is who we want to get data about. So who answered the survey? Again, I said that for some reason, I am the only mentor who received the survey, and then I passed it out. But Udacity doesn't know about that. And then I passed it out to our session, right? The band 783 session. So everybody in band 783, or a few people, answered the survey, right? And then Udacity perhaps uses that data to make their decisions, right? So band 783 session is a sample of the total population, right? It's just a part of the population. It's a subset, right? So the population is everything we want to get data about. Another example, is a bakery with 4 branches is trying to assess the quality of the bread made. Bakery has 4 branches, and then they're trying to assess the quality of the bread made. So what should they do, right, to assess the quality? Should they test all the bread that they make, let's say even for a week? Should they test all the bread that they make for that week? It's very unlikely that that would be possible, right? So if the process of making the bread is the same in all the bakeries, and then every day they do the same thing, they could test maybe 10 bread from one bakery, or from one branch, sorry. They could test 10 bread from one branch, right? Or they could test all the bread in one branch, or they could test each one bread from each branch, right? So all of that is subset of the total number of bread made is what they call the sample. It's a sample of the population. It is not the whole thing, it's just part of it, right? And each respondent or each bread tested is called a data point. So cool. Move to the next one, sir. So I have population and sample example. So let's consider these examples, right, to make sure that the concept is well grounded. Number one, Mrs. Smith wants to do a statistical analysis on students' final examination scores in her math class for the past year. She considers her data to be the population data set, or sorry, should she consider her data to be a population data set or sample data set? Again, Mrs. Smith wants to do a statistical analysis on students' final examination scores in her math class for the past year. Should she consider her data to be a population data set or sample data set? The second one, a group of students surveys 100 students from their freshman class to determine the number of pets in each student's household. The group plans to compute statistical findings on the data and generalize these findings to the homes of all freshman students. Should the group consider the data to be a population data or data set, or sample data set? So thinking about it, for the first one, Mrs. Smith wants to do a statistical analysis on students' final exam scores in her math class. So the math class is hers, right? And then she wants to do it on the students of her class, right? So if she gathers data from every student in her class, then her data set is the population, because she is not concerned with all the students in the school. She is concerned with students in her class. Okay, for the second one, the school surely has many students, right? And he surely has many freshmen. So you say a group of 100 students from their freshman class. A group of students surveys 100 students from their freshman class to determine pets in each student's house. So you already see that we take a subset of the freshman class. So the second one, number two, is a sample, right? The group consider the data to be a population or a sample. The second one, the group should consider the data to be a sample. Cool. Next. So here we have types of statistical variables. Again, let us just remind ourselves of the scenario. So with the aim to better understand students, as well as improve and personalize student experience on their platform, University recently launched a survey to be taken by all students enrolled in various nano degrees, right? To be taken by all students. That is population. Here are the questions that were posed or contained in the survey. How old are you? What's your education? How many years of experience you have? How would you rate our platform on a scale of 1 to 5? How many computers or PCs or laptops you have? And what is your current employment status? How tall are you in meters? So notice here that the replies to these questions are not the same. How old are you? The reply is going to be a number. What is your location? The reply is not going to be a number, but be a text. Country, maybe Cameroon, France, Germany, Britain, Australia. How many years of experience do you have in tech? Again, this is going to be a number. Right? How would you rate our platform on a scale of 1 to 5? Again, this will be a number. How many computers or PC or laptops you have? That will be a number. What is your current employment status? This will not be a number because you're either employed or unemployed. And how tall are you in meters? This will also be a number. So here we see that there are two main types of statistical variables. So we have the quantitative statistical variables, all the numbers as I said, and then we have the qualitative statistical variable. So here, everywhere, here's the data that we've collected. Age, number, location is text, ideas of experience, number, rating number, number of computers, number, employment status, text, Boolean actually, because it's either or. It is either A or B, either you're employed or you're not employed. And then meter, height in meters, numbers. So we have two types again. We have two types of statistical variables, quantitative variables. We call them values, right? And they're divided into two. You can either have continuous variables. Continuous means that between 1 and 2, for example, there can be many other values in between. For example, the height in meters. See that the height has decimal points. Between, for example, someone that is 1 meters and someone that is 2 meters, there is an infinite number of possible height, right? So that is continuous. For discrete, we have something that it's discrete, like it's either 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? So there is not, it is not continuous. Let me put it that way. Means that there's no decimals, there's nothing linking maybe 1 and 2, there's no 1.1, 1.2, even though there could be, it could still be like that and then be discrete, but there's nothing that links value A to value B, right? Example, number of computers. You can either have 1 computer, 2 computers, 3 computers, 4 computers, 5 computers, 7 computers, 20 computers. Right? You cannot have half of a computer. You cannot have 2.5 computers. So that is a discrete variable. Another example of a continuous variable can be maybe the distance between home to a place of work. So if we want to survey the population of the world, we can have any number of distance. We can have any distance between home and place of work, starting from ranging from 0, because distance is always positive, ranging from 0 maybe till the maximum distance that you can have because of the perimeter of the Earth, circumference of the Earth, something like that. So you see that there are decimals, this possibility of having decimals, right? A step, even though we have 1 meter, there are several other numbers between 1 meter. That is still the distance. Another example of a discrete variable can be the number of pictures taken in 2018, the number of pictures taken on Christmas Day, right? You cannot take half of a picture. You're talking about taking a half picture, but you cannot take half of a picture. It's either you take a picture or you don't take a picture. Okay, so we also have qualitative variables, right? Qualitative variables. Example is, for example, the location. Where are you? I'm in Australia. Where are you? I'm in the USA, right? That is what qualifies, like it describes. So we also call them categorical variables, and for each of them we call them categories. So now there are also 2 types of categorical variables. We have the nominal, right? There is no order involved. Where is you? And an example here is the location. So where are you? I'm from the USA, I'm from Belgium, I'm from Italy, right? There is no order. And we also have ordinal, right? Ordinal, order, ordinal. It shows that even though it is categorical, but there is some order. An example will be the rating. So when you're rating something, you can either rate from 1 maybe to 5 star. How likely or how do you like our services? From 1 to 5 star. So it's true that it is not it's true that it's categorical, like either 1 star, like I like it very much, I like it but not much, I have no feeling about it, I don't like it, I greatly dislike it. You see that in as much as that is categorical, but there is some order, right, from disliking to liking. Well, let's move to the next one, sir. Frequency table. Let's going to talk about this frequency table. So this is the data that we have, right? So now that we have data, we can start asking ourselves questions. How many people are my age, for example? If you this student, for example, how many people are my age? How many people are older than me? How many people are younger? How many people have more computers than I have? How many people weigh less? Right? So to answer these kind of questions, you need to count maybe the number of times each question or each value appears, or each value appears in the answers. For example, if we ask how many people are from Cameroon, we'll come and see, all right. So we'll come and count, okay, there is 1 person from Cameroon. All right, there's 1 person from Cameroon. We ask, okay, how many people, if I am, say, 13, and okay, how many people are older than I am? So count, it is 3, 2, 3, 4, so 4 people, 5 people, 6 people, 7 people, 8 people, 9 people. So 9 people are older than I am, right? So in order to do this more effectively, we use frequency tables, right? So let's do that for the example of age. This is the data that we have. Data has changed slightly here. This is the data that we have. So how many people are 23? So you have to count the number of times 23 appears in this age, right? So 1 time, 2 times, 2 times. 2 people are 23, right? And how many people are at least 29? So I have to count the number of times that 29 appears. Oh, sorry, I have to count the number of times that we have ages greater than 29. How many people are at least 29, greater than 29? So we have 29. This is 9, 1 time, 2 times, 3, 4, 5. How many people are at least 29? 5. So results were gotten from another band session with 90 respondents. Right? 12 are 29. With respect to our sample size, do we have a greater proportion of 29-year-olds? So the question is, okay, results were gotten from another band session with 90 respondents. 12 are 29. So with respect to the sample size, with respect to our respective with respect to our respective sample sizes, we have a greater proportion of 29-year-olds. Let's just count. So here we notice that if we just want to look maybe at the number 29, the number of people who are 29 years old, then of course the other sample has a greater number of people who are 29 years old, right? But the question is, with respect to our sample size, like how many people are in a sample size with 10 of us? So do we have a greater proportion of 29 years old? Well, let's look at what we've been discussing. So this is what we've been talking about generally. So we're going to answer the last question at the end. So we look for the frequency, the number of times each age appears. So the frequency of each age in our data set. Right? So 12 appears 1 time, 23 2 times, 25 1 time, 27 1 time, 29 3 times, 32 1 time, and 33 1 time. And there's a property that we call cumulative absolute frequency. Cumulative absolute frequency is the sum of the frequencies at each stage. So here, cumulative absolute frequency is 1. Cumulative absolute frequency at this point is 3, right? So it's 1 plus 2. Cumulative absolute frequency at this stage is 4. Here it is 5. Here it is 8. Here it is 9. And here it is 10, equal to our sample space, right? And then our relative frequency is the quotient, right? Is the frequency divided by our sample space, or the length of our sample space. And the purpose of the relative frequency, as you just said, helps us to compare data sets, or to compare different sample sizes or samples. Okay, so here, for example, we have for the other sample, we have the relative frequency of people who are 29 years old to be 12 divided by 90. That gives us 0.1333 or 13.33%. To respect to our sample size, or to our sample sizes, there are more 29-year-olds in band session 7 and 3 than in the other session. Sorry for the others, than in the specific other session. Right. So this aspect of population is very important. It's very important. Population and sample, it is so very much important. When we've carried out a survey, for example, in real life, we should be careful not to generalize. Okay. So if we carry out a survey, let's say in Britain, and then the average person in Britain, for example, eats 24 calories, it wouldn't be correct for us to say that, okay, human beings eat 24 calories per day in general, right? So we would have to say a human being in Britain, in general, eats 24 calories a day, right? So we should be careful with that, careful with taking statistics that correspond to a sample and then just putting it on the whole population, like generalizing it. We should be careful with that. So frequency tables are very useful in the fact that it helps us to quickly see how our data is, right? To quickly see maybe patterns in our data. Like here for the age, I quickly see that the most common age is 29, right? I don't need to stress much. I don't need to maybe go ahead counting. I quickly see that the most common age is 29, but relative frequency also helps us. The relative frequency helps pass that information even better. Okay, relative frequency even helps pass that information even better. So, so imagine a case where all band students ever respond, right? So what would happen? Our data set is going to be very large. It's not going to be 10 students anymore. It's going to be very large. The age range, imagine the age range that would be, right? The age range is going to be very, very, very wide. Assuming that the smallest or the youngest person, for example, in band is maybe like 11 years old, and the biggest person wants to explore a new career change is 55, right? The age range is too wide. And then when that happens, it becomes a little difficult to represent it in tables. Okay. So how do we go about that? Or how do we, if we still want to quickly get information from our data without necessarily counting? Counting may actually be practically impossible, right? Imagine carrying out a census of maybe everybody in Cameroon, and then after that you have to count for each person. Like it's difficult. We cannot have a frequency table maybe for the age ranges for each age, right? It's going to be too big, too wide. So the possible solution is that we can group the data in intervals. Like we could say, I think that's very common even with population census, from 0 to 5 years babies, from 5 to 10 adolescents, from 10 to 15 the whatever small adults, from 18 to max adults, right? So we have to group the data in order to make sense of it. And then there are some laws that govern grouping of data, right? So the number of classes should not be too high. 6 to 8 normally is good. It's the maximum number that we want to work with. Neither should it be too low. Right. Well, depending on the data or depending on what you're trying to find out, um, should not be too low. Reducing it to be too low, you lose or result in the loss of valuable information, right? We lose a lot of information. And also, accepting maybe the extreme classes, that depends also on what you're trying to find out. Again, for population, the intervals are not the same. Accepting maybe the extreme classes, all intervals should have the same width, because if not, the information can be misrepresented. So it depends on what you're trying to find out. Usually, you find out that it's important for intervals to be the same. When I say interval, it's like, okay, if you're looking for ages of people in band, if we say, okay, um, we have 50 people and then their age from maybe 10 to 50, the interval in that case should be something like 5, right? If you have 50 people and then their age from 10 to 50, to calculate the width of the interval, you should take the highest minus the lowest. Highest age that's 50 minus the lowest age that is 10, that is 40, and then I divide by the number of people that we have, 50 people, or maybe 10 people. 40 people, okay, that divided by the number of people that we have. Here in our example, we were at 10 people, so 40 divided by 10, 4. So each interval we have 4 people, right? But if we're trying to measure something else like childhood, babies, childhood, adolescents, adult, you see that the intervals may not necessarily have the same weight, right? So another solution, right, rather than grouping data in intervals, what one can do is to use graphical solutions. Right? Graphical solutions enable one to quickly view conclusions or a summary of the data without having to explain or without having to talk much. Right? To conclude findings, one can either have tables and group them. Can either have tables and then group the table into intervals if you needed and you explain, or you can graph the conclusion. Right? Graphing the conclusion usually is the best. Like there's so much that is being put into data visualization. Visualizing, being able to visualize data appropriately is a key skill and it's very demanded, right? So if we want to graph our data, if we want to make if we want to make conclusions about our data, what are the options available? Actually, there's so many of them. I'm just going to touch some. Right, there's so many of them. I think the classroom has a good number of them too, with Pareto charts, um, bar graph, histogram, bar chart. So you're just going to touch them while going, right? But I think that the purpose of maybe graphing a solution is to better present it, right? To give a quick summary. If you are in, if you've been asked in your company, perhaps to present some findings, I'm not sure that it will be best to come with tables. Tables can help, but if the data is very, very, very much, and see, it becomes overwhelming, and then people will have to be looking at numbers, or the board of directors have to be looking at numbers. That is really not the best. So graphs, that is where graphs are important. It helps us summarize data. It helps us deters. Right? So we have bar graph, histogram, pie chart. So the bar chart or the bar graph, I think is most suitable for categorical data. Actually, even though we have here numeric data, it's good for categorical data, and it is good when each of the classes. Because here we can also consider each as the categorical, since you take each age has its own, or each age is a number on its own, right? So you see that it is very easy to see that the most common age is 29, like we didn't need to count anything. You see that the most common age is 29, and then it's followed by 23, and then a couple of ages have the same frequency, right? It's easy to see. Note that for a bar graph, there is no link between there's actually no link between this age and this age, and the spaces can be same. Like the spaces don't mean much. What matters is this level. Like this is the age of the category. It could be Cameroon, Brazil, France, and then this one represents the frequency of the number of people from each of those countries. So there is really not much relationship with the data that is here. So a histogram. So this is what a histogram looks like. For a histogram, you see that we work in intervals, right? We work in intervals. So we have here from 20 to 30, it has a frequency of 2. 30 to 40, frequency of 4. 40 to 50, frequency of 4. So it shows that the number of ages, right, that between 20 and 30 years old, so it could be 20, it could be 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, or 29, right? So from 20 to 30, data not included, okay? So we have two people aged, maybe two people having ages 20 to 30. So we have four people having ages 30 to 40, four people having ages 40 to 50. We have five people having ages 50 to 60. Right, so that is what the histogram does. So you notice that almost always for histogram, you'd have the numeric data down here. And not only will the data be numeric, it will also be continuous, right? It will not be categorical. Okay, it may, but most of the times it wouldn't be. Right? Histograms are better for continuous data, continuous numeric data, right? And then the next the pie chart. The pie chart just represents the data that we have as a fraction of the whole. Okay, so here already represents like, okay, so 13 to 25-year-olds make 45% of the data set, right? So you see here it's presented as a fraction of everybody that is present in the data set. So Facebook users by age group 25, 45, 45, 65, 19, and 26, 44, 36, right? So there are many other there are many other charts, there are many other ways of visualizing data. I think the course is going to have some of them. We have line charts, we have polygons, right? So depending on what you want to present, or depending on what you want to present, to make the choice of the appropriate chart to use. All right. So a quick question. So assuming that this is a graph of your company's profits with time, right? So which one would you want to be your company? Is it graph A or graph B? Right? Is it the first graph or the second graph? So if you chose graph B, then that's most probably because you saw that your you saw that here the profit was, or the line is kind of steeper, right? But in effect, these graphs show the same thing. Okay, so when we're working with graphs, we want to be careful, right? Because the only thing that makes the difference is at the same, this is exactly the same graph, and what makes the difference is the scaling. All right, so here we have 0 0.51, 1.52, 2.53. But here we have 1, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. So we want to be careful with this when we are working with graphs. Okay, we want to be careful with this. We want to be careful that we have labeled the axis correct, example, and then we also want to be careful that we are working in the same scale. If you're trying to compare things, they should be on the same scale. Okay, great. Next. Measures of central tendency. So let's go back to our scenario. So now we have the band session 783 students planning a trip, right? So imagine the band session 738 students are planning a trip with other students, sorry, where they have to meet other students, sorry about the typo. Two smart ones come up with an idea to make a t-shirt for their session, like for the 783 session. So it cost them $4 to make. And then how do they determine the selling price, given that they have to make a profit margin? So here's the thing, here's what the question is saying. So all the band sessions have to go maybe on a field trip. So in order to identify that, okay, this is band session 783, for example, a couple of students come up with an idea to make a t-shirt, band session 7.783, yay, right? And then it cost them $4 to make it. So how do they determine the price at which they should sell the t-shirts to their fellow students, given that they want to make a profit margin? Right. So, oh yeah, I have an idea. So we're going to use maybe we're going to make use of the weekly pay data. So assume that for the 10 students, this is their weekly pay data, right? The first student has a weekly pay of $7, the second one $9, the 10, the third $5, and so on, right? So one had the idea that they could use the weekly pay data. Unfortunately, the weekly pay data is a list, right? We have a whole range. We have 10 values, and we need just one value for the selling price. So how do we best determine that one value that will be the selling price of the t-shirt, right? So one of the things that we could do is to choose an intermediate value between or among all the data we have, right? And that is what we call the mean. So we choose an intermediate between all that we have. We add all the weekly pays, for example, and then we divide it by the number of students. So doing that gives us the price to be equal to all of the values divided by 10, and the price equal to 9.1, right? $9.1. So here, the mean takes into consideration every other value, right? No matter how big or how small the value was, it was taken into consideration before we came up with the mean price, right? Because you add all the values and then divide by the number of values. So that is one way of looking at the problem. So as the two people are deciding, another person comes up with an idea. Like, no, but what if we chose just the most common occurring value? Right? What if we choose the most common occurring value? So we have 10 people, and then why should we bother calculating the mean? Why don't we just choose the most common weekly salary? And in this case, the most common salary is 7, and 7 appears 3 times, right? And this is what they call the mode. The mode is the most common occurring value. Oh, just let me just say the mean is also called the average, right? The mean is also called the average. So the mode is the most common occurring value in the data set. What is the mode? The mode is the most common occurring value in the data set. So let's not lose the goal, right? Let's not forget about the goal and then be carried by the statistics and the jargon. Right here, we're trying to find the price or one value, right, that will better represent all the values in the data set such that it helps us determine the selling price at which we want to sell the t-shirt, right? So here the mean gives us $9, $9.1. The mode gives us $7. Why are we here at 8? Why the students were here at 8? Another one comes with an idea, right? that, okay, but what is the value that is midway between the max and the mean? Like if we sort our data, what value is midway, right? So that's a value that they call the median. Okay, that's a measure of central tendency that they call the median. So it says select the data value that is midway between the most paid and the least paid. So to do that, we'd have to sort, right? We'd have to sort the salaries in descending order, and then we choose a value such that the number of values before that value and after that value are the same, right? So you will say if the number of elements in the sample is odd, sort and choose the medium number. Here, our sample is even, right? We have 10 values. So if we count maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, if we want to say that, okay, we'll choose this as the median, after this fifth value, this fifth 7, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 3, 4, 5. I think I made a mistake somewhere. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, good. So if we choose this value, this fifth value, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This fifth 7. See that the number of data points that are above this value, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and the number of data points that are below, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, do not or are not equal, right? So for an even value of data or for an even number of data points in the data set, what we want to do is that we select the two middle numbers, right? We select the two numbers such that with the numbers excluded, the number of data points on either side is the same. So you select these two 7s, for example. If you select these two 7s, you have 1, 2, 3, 4. Select these two 7s, you have 1, 2, 3, 4. Select these two 7s. So 7s, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So if cardinality of a sample, the number of elements is even, choose the number of choose two middle elements, choose the two middle elements and find the average, right? We'll find a mean. So this is 7 plus 7 divided by 2, this is 7, right? So using the median, we see that the value or the price should be 7. So take note, this is what descriptive statistics tries to do, right? Measures of central tendency. We're looking for one value that will better represent the whole data set, right? Here we're trying to describe the data. We're trying to describe the data. We're looking for one value that will better represent the whole data set. Okay, so now we have the average or the mean, right? The mean that takes into consideration every possible value in the data set. We have the mode. The mode is the most occurring value. Like we don't care what the other values are. We just take the most occurring value. And then we have the median. The median, we don't care what the other values are. We just take the middle value. If the cardinality of the number of elements is even, we take the two middle numbers and then we look for the average, right? So depending on the situation or depending on what we're trying to solve, we can choose which value of the three we find is most representative of the data, right? So we can choose which value of the three is most representative of the data. So you can either choose the median, the mode, or the mean to be the price of the t-shirt, right? So I think there's some important things. There's some quite important things about the mean. The mean has some quite interesting properties, right? So the mean is good because it takes into consideration all the values in the data set, right? So it is the gravity center of the distribution and it is unique. That means that it takes into consideration every possible point of the data set and then it is unique, right? Good. So when we have extreme or scarcely representative values, too big or so small, the mean may not be representative. So what it's trying to say is, if we had, for example, a value here, if we had maybe somebody with a weekly pay of $1 million, right? You see that the mean will not be representative of the data, right? Because everybody has maybe less than $30, and because of that one person that has $1 million, the mean or the average weekly pay is going to be so big, right? It's going to be so extravagant, and then it does not help us much. So that's what I mean by the mean. When we have extremely or scarcely representative values, like it's either too big or it's too small, the mean may not be representative. Actually, for these values that are either too big or too small, that's what we call at times outliers. Right? We call them outliers. They're not representative of the data set. Right? If we want to consider them in everything that we're doing, then we are going to go astray. The data is not going to be reflective, or the results that we have are not going to be, it's not going to be reflective of the data set. So the third point, it makes no sense to calculate the mean for a qualitative variable. That makes sense, right? It makes no sense to calculate the mean for qualitative variables. Let's say, okay, what's the mean of employed and unemployed, right? It doesn't really make sense. You can calculate the mean or the average salary, you can calculate the average age, but cannot calculate the average employment. We can say that, okay, the number of employed people, now we're talking about cardinality, we cannot sum employment, we will not be able to sum employment, for example, and then we divide by the number of the total number of people, right? It doesn't sound right. Or if we have, so it makes no sense to calculate the mean of a qualitative variable, or if we have group data and any one of the intervals is not bounded. Oh, so you guys remember when we're talking about grouping the data from the tables, right? Bounded simply means that any one of the intervals is not bounded, simply means that there's a limit to it, right? There should be a limit to it. We cannot have group data and then one of the intervals is not bounded. Like it goes to infinity. If we have group data, for example, the ages between 1 and 25, or we're trying to, sorry, calculate the ages of people in university, the ages of people in university, we have the data of the ages of everybody in university, right? And then we want to group the data in intervals of 5, right? If we group and then there's no upper or lower bound, then it doesn't really make sense. Okay, so that's what it says. It says for group data, we use the class mark. So the class mark is simply the upper bound minus the lower bound of each interval to calculate the mean. So a simple example would be, again, if we're calculating the ages of people in university, and then we discover that the maximum age, for example, is 50, the minimum age is 10, right? And then we want intervals of 5. Okay, so we'd have 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. Okay, so for group data, we use the class mark. So use 15 minus 10 to give us that midpoint. The midpoint is what they call class mark. So you give us that midpoint, and then we multiply maybe by the frequency or the number of times that that value occurs, and then add it for each of them, and then divide by the total number of points, the total data set, the total number of points in the data set or element data set. Right, so hopefully that has passed. Any questions, please, you can still write on Slack, and then I'll reply. So if a constant is summed to each value, then the mean is summed to that constant also, right? If you take each value of your data set, for example, we have 2220, 1223, say, and then to each of the values you add a constant, then the mean will be equal to the mean that you have, the average that you have plus that same constant, right? And the same goes for multiplication, right? If you multiply all values by constant, the mean is also multiplied by the same constant. So here's an aside, right? The mode is usually what's representing, is usually what's representing than the mean. Except in cases of qualitative data, the mode is actually not a very good representative of qualitative data, right? It's not good. It's worse than the mean, very much worse than the mean. Sometimes we might want to use the median or the mode because it's more robust. Again, as we said, if we add a very big outlier, so the main data, like everything gets affected. As they say, is the gravity center, right? It moves drastically, right? So sometimes, so if you have 10 data points, for example, if we have these data points for salary, and then we're working on the mode, for example, right? Or we will even, let's take the median. If we're taking the median or the mode, we add one more data point here, right? $10 billion as weekly pay. But you see that the median is robust, like it doesn't change. The median will be 7, and then the mode would also be still the 7, right? But the mean would have changed drastically. So that is basically it for measures of central tendency. We want to find a value, right, that would represent our data set. So we have a data set maybe of 20 values, but we're looking for that one particular value that would better represent our whole data set. So the next thing that we're going to look at will be measures of variability. Measures of variability. So to situate us, I'd like us to imagine this. Imagine that we have three different data sets, right, about the weight of certain people. So this data set is not related to the other one that we've been working with. This is a total different example. So imagine we have three different data sets about the weights of certain people, and we know that in the three cases, the mean of the variable weight or the average is 55. Does it mean that the three sets are equal or similar? Right? So think about this. So if we only had to rely on measures of central tendency, and then we find a mid, median, and mode that have the same value, we may think that the data sets are similar, whereas that is not always the case, right? So we get the data and we find that the observations are for set one, right? We're talking about what the weight 55, 55, 55, 55, 55, 55, and 55, right? For set two, 47, 51, 54, 55, 56, 59, 66. For set three, 39, 47, 53, 55, 57, 63, and 71, right? So for set one, the mean is 51, median is 51, and the most occurring number is 51. Set 2, the mean is 65, the median is 5, and the mode is 5, right? And for set 3, the mean is 65, the median is 55. Like if I post 55, the number of terms after 55 is 3, number of terms before 55 is 3, median 55, sorry, and the mode none, right? Everything occurs one time. So you see that even though the measures of central tendency are the same for all the three sets, they are totally different data, right? The data sets are totally and completely different. That is why we need another, added to the measure of central tendency, we need some other value, right? That will give us more information about this difference in our data set. That will give us more information about our data set, right? So measures of central tendency are not very informative in this case, in this particular case. And the data is different. By looking only at the measure of central tendency, we think that they're the same. Right? So we need another measure to help us find out the variability in our data set, to help us find how far the data and the mean are. And hence, that's what they call variability. How different is the data set? How different is the data from, there are data points from each other? How different are the data points from the mean? Okay. So, set 1, we see the data is the same. Set 2, the data is a little different. Right? 65 minus 65, everything is 65. Type the maximum number minus the minimum number is a 0. Set 2, the data is different. This is different. The maximum number minus the minimum number is 16. And set 3, it is very, very different. Right? So this value, the largest number in the data set minus the smallest number, is what they call the range. The range gives us an idea of how spread the data is, or our data is, the data that we've collected is, right? So it gives us an idea of how spread our data is. So the spread here is maybe 0 because every value is the same. The spread here is 16, and the spread here is 32. Okay, so at least added to the measures of central tendency, now we know that S1, set 1 has the same data, set 2 has data that is different, and set 3 has data that is very different. The limitation of the range now is that it's not reflective of all of the data, right? It talks only about the maximum and the minimum, right? And then it changes a lot depending on the biggest and the smallest element. So imagine that, for example, in this set, we have two more data points, 155 in set 1, 155, and then 110 billion. We see that the range will be so big, right? And then it won't give us adequate information about the spread of the data, because in effect, the data is almost the same, and then the only thing that changes is the range. And the only thing that changes maybe is the last value. But looking only at the range, we'll be like, oh, the data is very different, you see, because we have 10 million minus 65. Right? So we need to look for a better way of expressing variability that takes care of maybe all the values in our data set, right? So how do we find a number that approximates the distance between the data, each data point, and the mean, right? To know, and here we're trying to find out how spread our data is, not just maximum number minus minimum number, but every particular data point in our data set. So one thing that we can do, right? One thing that we can do is that we can calculate the distance between each point and the mean, right? We can calculate the distance between each point and the mean, not caring whether it's positive or negative, like we just calculate the positive distance, and then we find the average of those distances. So this method is good. This is what we call the mean variance. Yeah, so we calculate the distance between the mean and each data point, and then we find the average of that. So consider set 2, this is set 2, and then the mean is 65, right? So take each of the data points, 47 minus 65, 61 minus 65, 64 minus 65, 65 minus 65, right? So you take all of that, get the difference between each data point and the mean, right? And then look for the average of all of that. So you see that we get a value of 3.74. That represents how spread out our data is. So we're going to look again about this on means in a few. So you see that this is how spread out our data is. So well, let me just say it now. It shows that the difference between each data point, right? It's like, and the mean is 3.714. Right, the difference between each, the average difference between the data point and the mean is 3.714. Right, so that's how spread the data is. So, though this is a good value, or this is a good method, right? Though this is a good method, and though this information, right? Though this information, the mean variance, actually, we call this the mean variance. So the mean, the average of the variance of the points. Variance is simply the difference between a point and then the average. Difference between the point and the average of the data set, or data point and the average in that data set. So we look now for the average, the mean variance, the average of those variances, and that is what this is. Right? So however, a most common measure is usually used. So though this one is good, right, because of the absolute values, sometimes it can be pretty confusing. So what people mostly use is the mean of the square deviation from the data. So this is why, okay, this is what sorry, how do I explain this mean variance? This is the deviation from the mean. I'm actually very sorry. This is the deviation from the mean. This is how they call this. The deviation from the mean, right? How far each data point is from the mean. Okay. So the most common measure that they use is the mean of the squared deviation of the data from the mean, right? The mean of the squared deviation of the data. So here what this simply means is that we square all of this, right? We square all of this, and then now we look for and then we look for the mean, or we look for the average. So let's consider set 2 again, right? The mean is 65. So for each of the points, we take 47 minus 65 all squared, plus 51 minus 61, 55 squared, plus 54 minus 65 squared, plus 55 minus 65 squared, plus 56 minus 65 squared, plus 59 minus 65 squared, plus 63 minus 65 squared. And then once we have all of that, or the sum of all of those squares, we divide it by the number of data points, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that is what is going to give us the mean of the square deviation of the data from the mean, right? And one of the reasons why they do this is such that the values that contribute, or that are very much further from the mean, will even be more further, right? So they'll contribute more to the variability, right? For example, the value 59 or the value 63. Okay, the value 63, for example, is very much further to 55 than maybe 56, right? So once we encode that, we want to make sure that this number that we want to encapsulate the variability, this number with which we want to encapsulate the variability in the data set, takes care or takes note of the fact that 63 is much bigger or much away from 55 than 59, right? So, and also this is preferred because there is no absolute value to work with, because everything will be positive at the end of the day, right? 47 minus 65, all that squared will turn out to be a positive number. And so this number is called the variance, right? So the mean of the square deviation of the data from the mean, but the average of the division of the data, right, from the mean is called the variance. So the variance verifies that as we're taking the square of the deviations, the bigger ones have more influence on the result, right? So this is like what I was talking about. So the unit of measurement of S2 are not the same as the ones in the sample because we have squared the deviations, right? Oh, so what we're trying to say here is that the unit of measurement of the variance, right, is not the same as the ones in the cycle because we've squared everything. So imagine that the units, for example, or the weight was in kilogram. So we have kilogram squared plus kilogram squared plus kilogram squared. And then at the end of the day, we have kilogram squared, right? And then it's completely different from what we have in the sample because the sample has weight in kilograms, right? And the variance will always be positive. You're squaring everything, so everything will be positive at the end of the day. And it is 0 when all the values coincide with the mean. Okay, so a data set that has same values everywhere has a variance of 0. So you see that this idea of variance nicely variance is the name of the number already, but this idea of variance nicely encapsulates variability in the data set, right? If every point in the data set is the same, then the variance is 0. Okay, great. So, and if the difference between the points are many, then the variance will even be larger, right? Cool. So, there is another cool concept, the standard deviation. So we already said that the variance does not have the same unit as the data set, right? Because it has been squared, right? So the standard deviation is the square root of the variance. It has the same unit as the data set, right? So if you're on kilograms squared, and I will take the square root, will be on kilograms. Okay, so that's cool. So its main properties are: it's the most usual measure of variability. Right? It has the same measure units that it has the same measure units as the sample. Sorry about this, as the sample, and then standard deviation is always positive for 0, just like its grandfather, the variance. Okay. So moreover, variance and standard deviation verify that if we sum a constant to all the data, the variance and the standard deviation stay the same. All right, and it makes sense. Okay, because if you sum constant to all the data, the variance or the variability of the data set has not really changed, right? The everything will stay almost the same. If, for example, the last number was 20 times bigger than the average, it will still be 20 times bigger than the average. Okay. And then secondly, if we multiply all values by positive constant, the variance is multiplied by the square of the constant. That makes sense, right? If we multiply all the values by positive constant, we're talking about the values in the data set. So the variance will multiply by the square. Remember that variance is equal to data point minus mean all squared, right? So it's going to multiply by the square of that constant, and then the standard deviation multiplied by the constant, right? Because it's the same unit. So cool. So you see that for me, descriptive statistics, we're trying to look for a number that gives us that describes the data set, right? We're trying to look for a number that gives us so much information about the data set without necessarily having to dig deep or to look helter-skelter. Okay, so divided into measures of central tendency and then measures of variability. So if we have the measure of variability and we have a measure of central tendency, we already have an idea of what our data can look like, right? So you have mode equal to 5, median equal to 5, mean is equal to 5, then most probably The standard deviation, well, depending on the data, and if we also have data about the standard deviation, and we have that the standard deviation is 0, then we know that, okay, all the values in the data are the same. Again, so if you have mode equal to 5, median equal to 5, mean equal to 5, and then we have standard deviation is equal to 0, or we have variance equal to 0, then we are sure, right, that all the values in that data set are the same without looking at it. Okay, so these numbers that gives us an insight, or that describe our data set. We're trying to describe the data set with one number, so called descriptive statistics. And it is used a lot. It is used a lot in the real world. It is used a lot in the real world. Like we just saw examples of somebody having to test bread, or the example of the factory that had to test bread, the bakery. So imagine that there's so much variance in the quality, right? Imagine that after testing the quality, there is so much variance. There's so much variance. One can already draw inside that, okay, different way and bakery B manufactures bread. So, well, that is it. What the variance says is, oh, we'll give another simple example. If we take the time that people take, for example, to reach the office, right? We take the time that we're trying to collect data that people take to reach the office, and then they tell us that, okay, the mean time or the average time is 25 minutes, and then the data set has a variance of let's see, five 5 minutes. What that means is most people reach their office at 25 minutes plus or minus 5. There's going to be something in the course, I think you'll see that in the course, where they say that most of the data set falls between, so if it's a dumbbell, a uniform distribution, most of the data set falls between the first quartile. If you have time, we'll look at quartile. But I think that's also in the course lectures. The questions, I'll gladly answer them. Most of the data falls between this quartile. There will be, actually, I don't even use quartile. Most of the data falls between the mean plus 2 standard deviations. Like 90% of the data falls between the mean plus 2 standard deviations on both sides, right? The mean plus 2 standard deviations on both sides. And then 60, I think it's like 60% or 67% falls between the mean and 1 standard deviation on both sides, the mean. So I'd like to continue with quartiles. I think it's already 1 hour. We've been hitting at this for 1 hour. So there is a problem. I'll try to see if I can come up with material for this. But I think now it's time for the QA. Right, 1 hour is passed. But the concept of the quartiles is not. It's a quite easy concept. It's very easy, like very straight to the point. Like, see if I can go through it in a few minutes. So let's look at this data, for example. So this data that we had, right? So simply when they say quartile, in quartile, what you hear is quarter, right? What you hear in quartile is quarter. So let me take this data. Sorry, let me take this data. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So let's add 2 more values here just for the sake of learning. 14 and 22. 14 and 22. So when it's a quartile, what you hear, for example, is quarter, right? So how many values do I have here in total? What is the length? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 13 minus 1, that is 12, right? So if I take 12 divided by quarter, right, 4, I have 3, right? So 3, first place, 1, 2, 3, this is 1. After that, 1, 2, 3, this is 2. 1, 2, 3, this is 3. 1, 2, 3, this is 4. Right. So the quartile is just a way of expressing expressing data as like in a relation as a relation to the whole. For example, like okay, this is the first quartile, right? The first quartile is the first three values. This is the second quartile. This is the third quartile, and this is the fourth quartile. If I happen to sort, let me sort this again. Data sort. Oh, I expected the title to sort range. Sorry, data sort selected range. Wait, right. So here's the first quartile, second quartile, third quartile. And the fourth quartile. I think I'm just going to come up with I think I'm going to come up with slides that handle this. Like if anybody has questions in these quartiles, I think what centiles and percentiles, I would gladly handle them. Right? If you have questions, then please do ask. This is where the first quartile ends. For example, this is where the second quartile ends. This is where the third quartile ends, and this is where the fourth quartile four, the fourth quartile ends. Right. So the quartile is a way of visualizing. Using quartiles, we can easily visualize our data. And we take note that the second quartile is always the median, right? Especially the data is odd. None of data is odd. Right? The second quartile or the value here. Sorry, the value at the end of the second quartile or at the start of the third quartile is always the median. Right. So I think I'll just come up with slides to handle that. If you have any questions, please do ask to pose. I'll be glad to answer. Right. So that is some statistic concepts that we have. That's some descriptive statistic concepts that we have. And I haven't seen any questions. Looks like I haven't received any questions. So I think this will be the end of the session. Please, if you have any questions, don't forget to share. Right? Don't forget to share, and I'll answer them. Okay, guys. Thank you very much, and bye bye. Till next time.